Worst Boeing 747 disasters. The Boeing 747 has one of the highest records of aircraft accidents, with many casualties and fatalities. The 747 is a massive aircraft, and its crashes often have fatal consequences, with some of them among the deadliest in the aviation industry. With over 166 aviation accidents and 3,746 fatalities as of November 2022, Boeing 747's rich history also has its sad parts. A typical Boeing 747 can seat anywhere from 276 to 605 passengers, so anytime there is an accident or hull loss, the consequences are often catastrophic, and there have been many such incidents. This video will consider the deadliest 747 crashes and their role in helping Boeing design improvements to the 747 before ending production in 2022. Number 10. National Airlines Flight 102. Date: the 29th of April, 2013. Cause: flight controls damaged by shifting cargo. National Airlines Flight 102 was a Boeing 747-428 BCF that flew the route between Cap Bastion in Afghanistan and Al Maktoum Airport in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. The plane was a cargo aircraft named Lorry, which was carrying 5 heavy armored vehicles and had 7 Americans on board. On its way to Camp Bastion Al Maktoum Airport, the 747 stopped to refuel at Bagram Airport. Moments after takeoff at 1,200 feet, the aircraft entered a stall and banked to the right, signaling a loss of control. The cargo had loosened and shifted inside the plane, damaging the flight controls. Seconds later, the 747 crashed onto the runway and exploded in a fireball. All crew members, 4 pilots, 2 mechanics, and a loadmaster, died in the crash. Number 9. El Al Flight 1862. Date: the 4th of October, 1992. Cause: separation of engines and extensive wing damage. Boeing 747-258F, which operated the El Al Flight 1862, was a cargo aircraft owned by Israeli airline El Al and carried 4 occupants on the day of the crash. The plane had begun its trip at John F. Kennedy International Airport, New York City, USA. Its final destination was Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv, Israel, with a stopover at Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, Netherlands, the location of the crash. During the flight from New York to Schiphol, the 3-man crew noticed a couple of technical problems. During the stopover, they made a temporary fix. They also loaded cargo, refueled, and picked up a soon-to-be-married El Al employee who would be the 4th casualty in this unfortunate incident. Minutes after takeoff, 2 engines broke from the plane and damaged a portion of the right wing. The situation quickly deteriorated. After trying desperately to land safely back at Schiphol Airport, the plane crashed into 2 apartments in the Groeneveen and Klein-Kreutberg flats. All 4 on board the 747 died, and 39 ground casualties were reported. Number 8. China Airlines Flight 611. Date: the 25th of May, 2002. Cause: metal fatigue cracks due to improper maintenance. The Boeing 747-209B involved in the 2002 crash was the only 747-200 in the China Airlines fleet and was to be sold to Orient Thai Airlines. It was purchased in 1979, logged 64,800 hours of flight time, and took its penultimate flight for the airline when the dreadful accident occurred. While en route from Taiwan to Hong Kong, the aircraft disintegrated in mid-air 20 minutes after takeoff. The plane crashed into the Taiwan Strait, northeast of the Penghu Islands. All 206 passengers and 19 crew members died. Metal fatigue cracks in the body of the aircraft contributed to the crash. The cracks were caused by improper maintenance after a tail strike incident 20 years earlier. China Airlines had neglected to fix the damage to the aircraft's tail. Over the years, the cracks had multiplied, and they led to the eventual disintegration of the plane and its subsequent crash. Number 7. Korean Airlines Flight 801. Date: the 6th of August, 1997. Cause: pilot error and poor communication between flight crew. En route from Seoul, South Korea, Korean Airlines Flight 801, operated by Korea Air, had the United States territory of Guam as its final destination. The Boeing 747-300 carried 237 passengers and 17 crew members, making a total of 254 people. Only 25 would survive the crash. The flight captain, Park Young-chul, attempted an instrument landing and made errors in calculating the plane's distance from the Antonio B. Wonpat International Airport in Guam. The crew had been using an outdated flight map that did not have a newly erected structure in their path. Thus, the pilot flew below the minimum safe altitude and, despite protests from the flight crew, pressed on. The regrettable incident was indeed avoidable and unexpected. A survivor said the crash occurred so quickly that passengers had no time to scream. Number 6. TWA Flight 800. Date: the 17th of July, 1996. Cause: fuel tank explosion. One of the deadliest air disasters in U.S. history, TWA Flight 800 sparked headlines as it was believed to be a terrorist act at first. The FBI and National Transportation Safety Board worked together to solve the mysteries of the incident. Eventually, criminal wrongdoing was dismissed, and the explosion was attributed to short-circuiting in the plane's electronics, which caused the fuel tank to explode. TWA Flight 800 was a Boeing 747-100 en route from John F. Kennedy International Airport, New York, to Leonardo da Vinci Airport, Rome. The takeoff from New York occurred on the evening of July 17, 1996, and was uneventful. However, trouble began 12 minutes after takeoff and seconds after it received instructions to climb to 15,000 feet. There was no communication to the control tower of any major problems, but seconds later, the aircraft exploded over the Atlantic Ocean. Call lines of air traffic centers in the area buzzed non-stop as pilots reported seeing the explosion. There were no survivors, and all 230 people died in the fireball. An extensive investigation launched after the accident and produced new stringent requirements for aircraft to prevent fuel tank explosions in the future. Number 5. Pan Am Flight 103. Date: the 21st of December, 1988. Cause: terrorist bombing. In yet another terrorist bombing, Pan Am Flight 103, a Boeing 747-121 aircraft, exploded while flying over the Scottish town of Lockerbie. The transatlantic flight route was Frankfurt-Detroit, with 2 stopovers at London and New York. Flight 103 included a feeder flight, and investigators believe the bomb originated with it and was transferred to the 747. The bombing killed all 259 people on board. 11 residents of Lockerbie were killed by falling sections of the plane. Pan Am Flight 103 is the deadliest attack on UK soil, as well as the worst air disaster in its history. In the aftermath of the Lockerbie bombing, 3 Libyans, including an intelligence officer, were implicated in the investigations. Because of this, former Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi accepted responsibility for the incident and compensated the victims of the bombing, but vehemently denied ordering the attack. However, in the Libyan civil war of 2011, he was accused by an opponent of doing so. Number 4. Air India Flight 182. Date: the 23rd of June, 1985. Cause: bomb explosion. Before the September 11th suicide crashes in 2001, the Air India Flight 182 plane bombing of 1985 was the deadliest aviation terrorism attack in history. The bombing was part of a larger terrorism plot that included the bombing of another Air India flight in Japan. The latter failed as the bomb detonated before it was loaded onto the plane. The bombing of Flight 182 was successful and cost the lives of all 329 people on board. Air India Flight 182 was a Boeing 747-237B, which was flying through the Montreal, London, Delhi, Bombay route. Members of the Canadian Sikh separatist group Babar Khalsa planted the bomb in the plane, which detonated in midair and plunged into the Atlantic Ocean. Investigations of the incident took almost 20 years and cost Canada $130 million Canadian. In the end, only one terrorist was convicted and jailed for 15 years for helping to build the bomb used in the attack. Number 3. Charkhi-Dadri collision. Date: the 12th of November, 1996. Cause: poor communication between the tower and flight crew. Considered the world's deadliest mid-air collision, the Charkhi-Dadri collision still rings bells when mentioned. On November 12, 1996, Saudi Arabian Flight 763, which had a flight path of Delhi-Dhahran-Jeddah, collided with Kazakhstan Airlines Flight 1907, which was en route from Kazakhstan to Delhi. The accident occurred over Charkhi-Dadri, a village in the west of Delhi. While the Kazakhstan aircraft was an Ilyushin IL-76TD, which ran a charter service and had 37 people on board, the Saudi Arabian Airlines flew a Boeing 747-168B, which had 312 people aboard. Flight 763 was on departure from the Delhi airport when it collided with Flight 1907, which was arriving. Both planes had been given clearance to ascend and descend, but the Kazakhstan plane was lower than expected. The air traffic controller tried to warn its pilot, but could not make contact in time to avert the accident. All 349 people on board both planes were killed in the crash. Number 2. Japan Airlines Flight 123. Date: the 12th of August, 1985. Cause: decompression due to faulty repairs. Similar to China Airlines Flight 611, this air disaster was caused by inadequate repairs after a tail strike incident years earlier. 12 minutes after takeoff, the Boeing 747-146SR suffered decompression in its cabin and struggled to regain control. 30 minutes later, it crashed into the Mount Takamagahara area in Gunma Prefecture. Japan Airlines Flight 123 was a domestic flight scheduled for landing at Itami International Airport, Osaka. There were 509 passengers and 15 crew members, making a total of 524 people on board. While all crew members and most passengers died in the crash, 4 passengers actually survived with injuries. It remains the deadliest single aircraft crash in Japan's aviation history. Number 1. Tenerife Air Disaster. Date: the 27th of March, 1977. Cause: bad weather and pilot error influenced runway collision. Known as the Tenerife Air Disaster, the runway collision between KLM Flight 1805 and Pan Am Flight 1736 is the world's deadliest air disaster, with 583 people losing their lives. The collision was a result of bad weather, misunderstandings between the KLM captain and air traffic control, and perhaps concern over the bombing explosion at the larger Gran Canaria airport days earlier. That explosion caused all flights to be diverted to Tenerife North Airport, which was still called Los Rodeos Airport back then. The collision occurred when KLM's Boeing 747-206B began its takeoff run, while Pan Am's Boeing 747-121 was still on the runway. Due to heavy fog, visibility was poor, and the KLM captain thought he had been given clearance by air traffic control. Both planes collided, and the ensuing inferno consumed almost everyone on the aircraft. While 61 people survived Pan Am 1736, all lives were lost on KLM 4805. This brings us to the close of the most horrific Boeing 747 disasters. They are sad, brutal, and extremely unfortunate, and we can only wish that the world never needs to deal with painful moments like these again.